$412,000, Kareen. That's what it cost to raise you, and a decent daughter would pay it back. My mother said it into a microphone. At her own 40th anniversary party. 90 guests, white tablecloths, my father grinning behind her like she'd told a joke. Then she walked down the aisle between tables and set a folder in front of me. Cream cardstock. A real invoice, itemized, with a due date printed in bold at the bottom. Go on, open it, let everyone see what free costs. Somebody laughed, then more of them. My Aunt Judith stared at her wine glass and said nothing. My sister Brooke filmed it on her phone, one hand over her mouth, delighted. I opened the folder. Line item 4, emotional labor, 1988 to 2014, $60,000. I felt every eye in that room. My hands were steady. That surprised me most. May I use the microphone? I asked. My mother handed it over, thrilled. She thought I was going to beg. I had one page folded in my purse. My accountant had printed it 9 days earlier. Freeze right there, me standing, room laughing, one page in my hand. Before I take you back to where this actually started, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? Which country and what time is it there? I love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is Nora Whitlock, and I was 36 years old the night my mother handed me that folder. I grew up in a yellow house on Ridgemont Road in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. 3 bedrooms, a garage my father never parked in, a basement that flooded every spring. From the outside, we looked like a family in a bank commercial. Inside, there were 2 children and 1 budget, and the budget only ever had 1 name on it. Brooke is 2 years younger than me. She had ballet, then competitive cheer, then a car at 17, then 4 years at a private college with a study abroad semester in Florence. I had a library card and a paper route. I want to be precise here because precision matters later. When I was 15, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and explained the family financial philosophy. Your sister has potential, Kareen. You have work ethic. Those need different investments. That's a real sentence, a woman said to her own child while folding laundry. So I worked. Grocery store at 16, 2 jobs at 18, community college at night while I answered phones for a title company during the day. And that title company is where my whole life quietly turned, though it took me about a decade to understand it. I learned property records, deeds, liens, mortgage assignments, tax certificates, boring paper that decides who actually owns what in this country. I was good at it. I got promoted, then poached, then licensed, and by 31 I was doing due diligence on commercial acquisitions for a firm in Cleveland that paid me $148,000 a year. My family never asked what I did, not once. To them I was Kareen, who does something with paperwork. Here's the part that will matter more than anything else, I tell you tonight. My grandmother Eleanor lived in the apartment over the garage from the time I was 9 until she died when I was 24. She was my father's mother, and she did not like my mother, and she never once pretended otherwise. Eleanor gave me 2 things. The first was a habit. She kept every receipt, every canceled check, every letter, in a navy blue accordion folder with a cracked elastic band. She used to make me sit next to her at her little table while she sorted them. Paper doesn't get emotional, Kareen. Paper just remembers. People will tell you a story about what happened. Paper tells you what happened. I thought it was an old woman's fussiness. I copied her anyway, because I loved her, and because she was the only adult in that house who ever said my name like it was a good word. The second thing she gave me was a warning I didn't understand for years. 6 weeks before she died, she gripped my wrist and said, "When they come for money, they'll call it love. Don't confuse the two." I was 24, I nodded. I filed it away like a receipt. Now the money. When I was 22, the roof on Ridgeline Road failed. My father sat in his recliner and told me the estimate was more than they had, and that Brooke's tuition payment was due the same month, and wasn't it lucky I was working. I paid $18,400 for that roof. New decking, new shingles, gutters, the whole job. I have the check images. I have the contractor's invoice with my name in the customer field. 6 months later, at Christmas, my mother told the neighbors that Gerald had handled the roof himself. I said, "Actually, I paid for that." She smiled at me the way you smile at a child who's interrupting. "Karine, don't be tacky." That word followed me for 14 years. Tacky. Anytime I mentioned money I'd given them, I was tacky. Anytime Brooke needed money, it was family. Then there was the night I heard the thing I wasn't supposed to hear. I was 28, dropping off a space heater because the furnace was out again. Front door was unlocked. My mother was on the phone in the kitchen with her sister Judith, and she wasn't quiet, because she never imagined I was worth being quiet around. "Brooke is the investment," she said. "Karine is the insurance." I stood in the hallway holding a space heater and understood, completely, for the first time, that I was not a daughter in that house. I was a line of credit they hadn't drawn on yet. I put the heater down inside the door and left without saying hello. And the fourth thing, the one they forgot about, which is the only reason this story has an ending they didn't choose. In March of 2016, my father asked me for $47,000. Not for the house. For Brooke's husband Tyler, who had opened a landscaping business, bought 3 trucks, and discovered that customers pay in 90 days while lenders want money in 30. My father asked me in the driveway, in the rain, in a voice I'd never heard from him. Small, almost polite. I said yes. Of course I said yes. But I'd spent 5 years by then reading documents for a living, and something in me had already gone cold and careful. "I'll do it," I told him, "but I'm not doing it as a gift, we're going to put it on paper." He laughed, "We're family, Karine. Then it'll be easy to sign." We sat at that same kitchen table, and I filled out a promissory note. $47,000, $4% simple interest, secured by the property at 4412 Ridgeline Road. My mother signed it too, because both their names were on the deed, and my grandmother's voice was in my head telling me paper remembers. My father signed it in blue ink and slid it back across the table like it was a napkin. "There," he said, "happy." Then my mother said the line I would think about for the next 10 years. "Just so we're clear, this doesn't make you special. You're doing what you owe this family." They never made a single payment, not one in 9 years. And they never once considered what a secured note actually is, or what happens when the person holding it finally decides to stop being patient. My mother's name is Loretta, and I've never once heard anyone call her unkind. That's the trick with women like her. She does the damage in a pleasant voice, at a nice table, in front of witnesses who all agree afterward that she meant well. The escalation started the year after I signed that note, and it came in stages, each one a little bolder, because nothing ever cost her anything. I got married in October of 2017. His name is Daniel, he teaches high school chemistry, and he is the single most decent person I have ever been in a room with. We had 41 guests in the back garden of a restaurant in Grandview, rented chairs. A cellist my coworker knew. Pie instead of cake. Loretta stood up during dinner with a champagne flute and said this, word for word. "We spent $64,000 on Brooke's wedding, and I'd have spent it twice. Karine always did prefer to do things cheap, and here we are, in a garden, eating pie." People laughed. My father laughed hardest. Daniel's mother put her fork down and stared at her plate. Here's what nobody at that table knew. When Brooke got married in 2015, my mother had called me in a panic about the deposit on the reception hall, and I had wired $9,000 into their checking account on a Tuesday afternoon. There is a memo line on that transfer. It says Brooke Venue. So I had paid for a piece of the wedding she used to humiliate me, at my own wedding, with my husband's family listening. I said nothing that night. I want to be honest about that, not because I was noble, because I still wanted her to love me, and I had learned by then that the price of admission was silence. The second incident, is the one that taught me what had actually happened to my money. Summer of 2019. Tyler's landscaping company landed a maintenance contract for a 9-building office park in Dublin, Ohio. Recurring revenue, roughly $200,000 a year. It changed their life. They bought a house. I got him that contract. The property manager was a woman named Vanessa Reeves, and I had done acquisition diligence on 4 of those buildings. She asked me over lunch if I knew anyone reliable for grounds. I gave her Tyler's number and I asked her, please, don't mention me, he's proud. At the 4th of July cookout that year, my father raised a beer and toasted Tyler's hustle. My mother told my Aunt Judith that Tyler was the kind of man who makes his own luck. I stood at the grill with tongs in my hand and let it happen. Then I walked around the side of the house to get more ice, and I saw it in the driveway, a used pontoon boat on a trailer, blue and white, Loretta's Lady stenciled on the back in script. My father came around the corner with a paper plate. You like it, he said, 23,000, got it in Sandusky. I asked him when they'd bought it. Oh, a few years back, spring I think. Spring of 2016. 3 weeks after I signed a $47,000 promissory note in that kitchen so that Tyler's trucks wouldn't get repossessed. I went home and pulled the note out of my file cabinet and read it 4 times, and I understood that I had not been lending money to save a business. I had been lending money to a woman who wanted a boat with her name on it. I still didn't call it in. Do you understand? I filed the boat away with the roof and the space heater and the wedding toast, and I kept showing up to Sunday dinners. If you're still with me, drop your country and your local time in the comments. And tell me honestly, would you have stayed silent that long? Because I did, and I'm not proud of it. The third incident isn't about money at all, which is exactly why it broke something. My grandmother Alina had been dead 7 years when my mother finally decided to gut the apartment over the garage. April of 2021. I got a text at 9:40 in the morning that said, and I quote, cleaning out the old lady's junk today. Come get anything before the truck comes at noon. The old lady's junk. Her name was Nora Whitlock, and she lived in that house for 15 years. I drove out there, and the driveway was already full of black garbage bags. My mother was on the porch with a cup of coffee, supervising. The apartment was almost empty. They'd taken her bed apart. Her curtains were down. On the floor by the closet, in a bag with 2 broken lamps and a bath mat, I found the navy accordion folder with the cracked elastic band. I sat on the bare floor of my grandmother's apartment and went through it. Canceled checks going back to 1979, a receipt for a washing machine, her social security letters, and in the back section, behind a rubber band of its own, a bank check dated June 1984, made out to a title company in Franklin County for $14,500. Down payment on 4412 Ridgeline Road. Alina had bought my parents that house, or at least the front door of it, and in 15 years of living over their garage, she was never once thanked out loud in my hearing. I took the folder to my car and put it in the trunk. Then I went back in the house to use the bathroom before the drive, and that is where I found the other thing. The kitchen drawer by the phone was open. Loretta kept coupons in it, and pens, and a yellow legal pad she used for grocery lists. The pad was face up. The top page had a heading in her handwriting, underlined twice. Kareen, actual costs. Under it, a column of figures, braces, winter coats, groceries divided by 4, a number for car insurance or 1618, a running subtotal in the margin, circled, 297,000. She had been keeping a ledger on me, for years, not on Brooke, on me. I stood in that kitchen with my hand on the drawer, and I did not take a picture, which I regret, and I did not say a word, which I don't. Because you don't tip your hand when you've just found out someone has been building a case against you since you were a child. I closed the drawer, I drove home. I told Daniel and he sat down on the stairs and said, Kareen, that's not a mother, that's a creditor. That was 2021. The last incident is the one that put everything in motion, And it happened because of something I did for a living every single day. February 11th, 2025. 2:40 in the afternoon. My cell phone rang while I was in a parking garage in Cleveland, and it was a woman named Priya Raghunnathan, an escrow officer at a title agency in Worthington. Mrs. Whitlock, I'm calling about a lien of record. There's a mortgage recorded in your favor against 4412 Ridgeline Road, and my sellers are telling me it was satisfied years ago. I can't find a release. I sat down in my car. Sellers, not borrowers, sellers. My parents had a signed purchase contract on the house. $289,000, cash offer, closing scheduled for March 7th. They were moving to a condo in Powell to be closer to Brooke. Ma'am, Priya said, was that note ever paid? No, I said, not one payment. There was a pause on her end. The specific pause of a professional realizing her file just got interesting. Here's what 9 years does to $47,000 at 4%. It becomes $64,000 and change. And here's what a recorded mortgage does at a closing table. Nothing moves until the lienholder signs. Not the sale, not the payoff, not the condo. Which means for the first time in my entire life, my mother needed my signature, and there was no version of the world where she could get it by calling me tacky. They didn't tell me they were selling the house. Let that land for a second. They listed the home I put a roof on, sold it, and picked out a condo, and I found out from a stranger in an escrow office. I called my father that night. He answered on the fourth ring, and I could hear the television. We were going to tell you, he said. When? Karine, it's our house. It's my lien. Then Loretta took the phone, and this is where she showed me exactly who she'd been the whole time. You are not going to hold up this closing over a gift. It wasn't a gift, you signed a note. I signed a piece of paper to make you feel important. Her voice went flat and precise, the way it did when she was done performing. You've spent your whole life keeping score like some little clerk. Do you know what that makes you? A parasite with a filing cabinet. I remember exactly where I was standing. Kitchen island, Daniel across from me, the dishwasher running. Release that lien, Karine, or I will make sure this entire family knows what you really are. I said, then I'll see the payoff at closing. And I hung up. I want to be very clear about what I did next, because this is the whole hinge of the story. I did not sue anybody. I did not send a threatening letter. I did one thing. Nothing. I did not sign. I did not respond to the title company's request for a release. I let a valid, recorded, unpaid mortgage sit exactly where it had been sitting since March of 2016. Their cash buyer waited 11 days and then walked. Buyers do that. The condo in Powell went to somebody else, and my parents lost a $6,000 earnest money deposit, and more importantly to Loretta, they lost the story they'd been telling everyone at church about their new life near their good daughter. For 6 weeks after that, nobody in my family spoke to me. Then, in mid-April, an envelope arrived. Heavy cream cardstock, calligraphy, the whole production. Gerald and Loretta Whitlock request your presence in celebration of 40 years. Saturday, June 14th. The Blackthorn Room at the Ridgemont Country Club. Daniel held it up to the light like it might be explosive. Why on earth would she invite you? I looked at that invitation for a long time. And because I am my grandmother's granddaughter, and because paper doesn't get emotional, I understood something. She wasn't inviting me, she was scheduling me. She had 90 guests, a microphone, a room she'd rented for $1,100, and a daughter who had cost her a house sale. She was going to get that release. She was just going to do it in front of an audience, where I'd have to choose between my dignity and her performance. So I said yes. I RSVP'd for 2. And on June 5th, 9 days before that party, I sat down across from my accountant, a 61-year-old man named Walter Brennan who has been doing my taxes since I was 26, and I put the Navy accordion folder on his desk, and I said, Walter, I need you to build me something. He asked how much time he had. 9 days. He opened the folder, looked at the first canceled check and said, "Karine, this is going to be one page." The Blackthorn room has gold curtains and a parquet floor, and a chandelier that Loretta described to 3 separate people that night as original. We got there at 7. I wore a navy dress. Daniel wore the tie I bought him for a funeral, which he pointed out in the car, and I told him it was appropriate. 90 guests, round tables of 8, my mother in emerald green, working the room like a candidate, my father by the bar in a jacket that no longer buttoned, Brooke at table 2 with Tyler, and their little boy asleep in a stroller. And at table 9, near the back, my Aunt Judith, Loretta's older sister, 68 years old, retired court reporter, 31 years of transcribing other people's worst days. Judith and I had exchanged maybe 200 words in my adult life, but she came over during cocktails, put a hand on my arm and said, "I heard about the house." That's all, then she went back to her table. I ate a chicken breast. I made conversation with a neighbor about her knee replacement, and I waited because I knew what was coming, the way you know weather. At 8:20, the DJ handed Loretta the microphone for the toast. She did 9 minutes on 40 years of marriage. She thanked God, the club, the caterer. She said Brooke's name 4 times. She called Tyler the son we got to choose. She did not say my name once, and the room started to notice, and that was deliberate because she needed the silence before the strike. Then she said, $412,000, Karine. That's what it cost to raise you, and a decent daughter would pay it back. And she walked the length of that room, past 9 tables of people who had known me since I was a child, and she set a cream folder in front of me. Go on, open it, let everyone see what free costs. Laughter, not everyone, but enough that I could hear individual voices in it. The invoice was 2 pages and she had it professionally printed. Statement of account. Karine A. Whitlock, 22 line items, prenatal care, braces $4,200, groceries, utilities allocated by headcount. Line item 4, emotional labor, $60,000, and at the bottom in bold, a total of $412,880 and a due date 30 days out. She had also, and I want you to appreciate this, included a payment option. Alternative to payment in full, execution of lien release, 4412 Ridgeline RD. There it was, the entire point of the party, printed at the bottom of page 2. May I use the microphone? I asked. She handed it to me with both hands. She was radiant. She thought she was watching me kneel. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I have never once needed to raise my voice in that family because they were always the ones shouting. Thank you all for coming, I said. My mother's right about one thing. Nobody in this room has ever seen the numbers. I took the page out of my purse. 1 sheet, folded in thirds. Walter had printed it on letterhead because Walter is a professional and because a document that looks official changes the temperature of a room. My accountant put this together. It's 1 page. It's shorter than hers. Somebody at table 5 laughed, and it was not the same kind of laugh as before, and Loretta's chin came up 1/2 inch. Line 1, roof replacement, 4412 Ridgeline Road, August 2011, $18,400. I have the contractor's invoice with my name on it. The room went quiet the way a room does when it realizes it's been enjoying the wrong side of something. Line 2, wedding venue deposit for Brooke, February 2015, $9,000, wire transfer. Memo line says Brooke venue. Mom used that wedding to make fun of mine, so I thought I'd mention who paid for the hall. Brooke's head turned toward our mother very slowly. Line 3, furnace repair, 2018, $2,600. Line 4, property taxes, 2019 and 2020, paid directly to the Franklin County Treasurer because the account was delinquent. $11,200. Karine, my father's voice from the bar, not a warning, a plea. Line 5, promissory note dated March 4, 2016. $47,000 secured by the property, signed by Gerald and Loretta Whitlock. 9 years, 0 payments. With interest, $64,120. I set the page down on the tablecloth. Total, $105,320. That's the real ledger. And Mom, I'd have never said a word about any of it, except you just billed me for love in front of 90 people. Loretta reached for the microphone. I didn't give it to her. You said a decent daughter would pay it back. I let that sit. Fine, let's settle all accounts. And then Judith stood up at table 9. Judith didn't say anything dramatic. She held up her phone, looked at her sister across 9 tables and said, Loretta, I've been recording since the toast started. 31 years in a courtroom. I record everything. Then she sat down and finished her wine. The DJ put music on because nobody knew what else to do. People started leaving at 8:50, which for a country club anniversary is a stampede. My mother stood alone in the middle of that parquet floor in emerald green, holding an invoice nobody would look at. Daniel and I left at 9. In the parking lot, Judith walked up to my car and sent me a 41-minute audio file and said one sentence before she went back for her coat. Your grandmother asked me to keep an eye on you. Took me 11 years to do it. Wherever you're listening from right now, morning where you are or the middle of the night, drop your country and your local time in the comments. Because what I did over the next 4 months is the part people always tell me they never saw coming. Monday morning, June 16th, I called a real estate attorney in Columbus named Adrienne Cho. I'd sat across a closing table from her twice in my career. She charged $385 an hour, and she was worth all of it. I didn't bring her a story, I brought her a banker's box. The original promissory note in blue ink, the recorded mortgage with the county stamp and instrument number, 9 years of bank statements showing no payments received, the 2011 contractor invoice with my name in the customer field, the wire confirmation with Brook Venue in the memo line, 2 years of Franklin County tax receipts, Priya's February email asking for a release, my mother's 2-page invoice, and Judith's recording. Adrienne read for 20 minutes without speaking, then she took her glasses off. Can I ask you something? Why didn't you enforce this in 2018 or 2020? Because I kept thinking she'd love me eventually. She nodded and didn't make a moment out of it, which I appreciated. All right, here's the problem I was worried about, and here's why it isn't a problem anymore. She turned the invoice around to face me. Ohio gives you 6 years on a note like this. You signed March 2016. Somebody could have argued you sat on it too long. My stomach dropped. Except, she tapped page 2. Your mother printed a document, served it on you in front of 90 witnesses, and at the bottom offered to cancel the balance in exchange for executing a lien release. That's a written acknowledgement that the lien exists and is valid. She authenticated your mortgage for me. Nobody had to depose her. She catered it. She was trying to get the release. She was trying to embarrass you into it. Instead, she signed my exhibit list. Adrienne wrote something on a legal pad. The recording gives us the timestamp and the chain of custody. Corrine, you're not just going to win this. She built it for you. What happened next was all mail. None of it dramatic. Order is the whole point. June 20th. Adrienne sent a demand letter, certified. 4 cold paragraphs. Principal $47,000. Accrued interest $17,120. Total $64,120. Payable in 30 days. Failing which we'd file a complaint on the note and a foreclosure action against 4412 Ridgeline Road. My father called 40 minutes after they signed for it. You sent a lawyer at your own mother. I sent a letter about a note she signed. Corrine, this will kill her. Dad, she rented a room and hired a printer. He went quiet. Then, in the exact voice from the driveway in the rain in 2016, he said, We don't have $64,000. I know, I said. I've known since Sandusky. He didn't ask what I meant, he knew. Then I did the second thing, which was nothing at all. She sent 9 text messages in 4 days. 2 of them matter. You have humiliated this family in front of every person who matters to me. And 16 hours later, I gave you life and you're billing me for it like a plumber. I screenshot both, forwarded them to Adrian, and put my phone face down. No reply. Not one word, all summer. If you've never gone silent on someone who has run your entire life, I can't fully describe what it does to them. Silence removes the only material they know how to work with. The third thing surprised even me. That banker's box wasn't full when I brought it in. I'd left Aliner's navy accordion folder at home because I thought it was sentimental. An old woman's receipts. I mentioned it as an afterthought at the end of our second meeting. Bring it, Adrian said. So in early July, we went through my grandmother's paper together in her conference room, and at 3:15 in the afternoon, Adrian stopped on a bank check from June 1984. $14,500, made out to a title company. Memo line, Whitlock closing. Do you have anything else from the purchase? There was one more page in that section. Half a sheet in Aliner's handwriting, dated the same month. I had looked at it a dozen times over 4 years and read it as a note about a car loan. It was signed at the bottom twice. Once by Nora Whitlock, once by Gerald Whitlock. Gerald agrees the down payment of $14,500 is advanced against his mother's life estate in the garage apartment, and that Nora Whitlock shall have the right to reside there for the remainder of her life, rent-free, and that upon sale of the property, the sum shall be repaid to her estate. Adrian read it twice. This is unrecorded, so it's not a lien, she said carefully. But it's a signed written obligation by your father, and your grandmother died in 2013 with a will. Who's the beneficiary of her residuary estate? I don't know, I was 24. Nobody told me anything. We pulled the probate file the following week. Franklin County, 2013, 4 pages, closed as a small estate, which is why I'd never heard a word about it. Aliner's personal property went to her son Gerald. And the residue of her estate went, quote, to my granddaughter Corinne, who is the only one who ever sat with me while I sorted my papers. I read that line in a courthouse hallway, on a plastic chair, and I cried in public for the first time in 11 years. A bailiff brought me a paper towel. She knew, she'd known since I was a teenager. She never said a word to me about it. She just made sure the paper remembered. Adrian added it as a second count. Not for drama. Because 41 years on top of $14,500 brought the total exposure against that house to just over $87,000. July 14th. That date wasn't a coincidence. My mother's invoice had a due date printed in bold at the bottom of page 2, 30 days out from June 14th. So on July 14th at 10:22 in the morning, Adrian filed in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, judgment on the note, foreclosure on the mortgage, and a claim on the estate obligation. She set the deadline, I just met it. Foreclosure filings are public record. Public records get scraped by services email real estate agents, and in a suburb where my mother had spent 40 years being the woman with the original chandelier, that email traveled at the speed of light. Then came the part I had nothing to do with, which is my favorite kind of consequence. July 29th, a voicemail from Vanessa Reeves in Dublin. The office park had traded to an institutional buyer in June, and new ownership was rebidding every vendor contract. Standard practice. Nothing personal. She was calling because Tyler Brandt's landscaping company had listed me as a reference. Not as family, as a professional reference. I called her back and told her the truth. I've never worked with his company, I have no basis to evaluate his performance, and I'm not comfortable being listed. That's it. Every word accurate, none of it a knife. They lost the contract on August 8th. $200,000 a year, gone to a company out of Delaware County that bid 9% under. I want to be honest. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Because that account only ever existed because I handed his number to a woman at lunch and asked to stay anonymous, and in 6 years, it had never once occurred to anyone in my family to wonder how a 2-truck operation landed a 9-building portfolio. They'd toasted his hustle in a driveway, standing next to a boat. Brooke called me on August 12th at 11 at night. I let it ring twice. She was crying in the way that means she'd been crying a while before she dialed. "Did you pay for my venue?" $9,000, February 2015. She told me Dad cashed out a life insurance policy. A long pause. "Kareen, she told that story at my bridal shower. I thanked him, in front of everybody. Then she said, I found something." She'd been at the house helping them sort things, because a foreclosure complaint makes people start sorting things, and she'd opened the drawer by the phone. The yellow legal pad was still in there. 4 years later, Kareen, actual costs. And Brooke, who is not stupid, did the one thing I never had. She read all 6 pages. "The total at the bottom is $297,000, she said. Her handwriting, entries going back to 2009. I sat up in bed. "Brooke, the invoice said $412,880. "I know," her voice went flat. She rounded it up for the party. She added $115,000 so it would land harder in front of people. That's the detail that ended it for her, not the lie about the wedding, the arithmetic, her own mother inflating a number by 6 figures for the acoustics of a room. She photographed every page and sent them to me that night. I forwarded them to Adrian at 12:40 in the morning. She replied at 7 with 3 words, Exhibit F excellent. One more step, and then the last room. Defending a foreclosure is expensive. My parents hired an attorney in Dublin and paid him a $7,500 retainer. They got that $7,500 by selling the boat. I know the exact figure because the buyer, a man in Marion who restores pontoons, posted the listing in a Facebook group my neighbor belongs to. Loretta's Lady, 2004, blue and white, sold for $9,400. They'd paid $23,000 for it 3 weeks after I signed that note. Their lawyer filed an answer on September 3rd. 3 arguments: that the note was a gift mischaracterized as a loan, that the statute of limitations had run, and that I had unclean hands for blocking the sale of their home in March. Adrian's reply brief was 11 pages. She attached the invoice, the audio, and my mother's own text message calling it billing me for it like a plumber, which, as she noted in a footnote I have printed and framed in my office, is not language anyone uses to describe a gift. The judge ruled October 2nd. Judgment on the note, $64,120 plus costs. The estate claim survived. Foreclosure decree entered, sheriff's sale ordered. Then Adrian called me with one last piece of math. After your judgment, the tax liens, and the fees, your parents walk away from a sheriff's sale with somewhere between $4,000 and $11,000. On a house that had a $289,000 cash offer on it in March. They asked for a meeting. October 18th, a Saturday, 2 p.m. at Adrian's office downtown. Not a kitchen table, not a country club, a conference room with a water pitcher and a box of tissues that firm clearly buys in bulk. My mother wore the emerald green. I noticed it immediately, and I've thought about it since. It was the only outfit she owned that had ever commanded a room, and she brought it to a room where it meant nothing. Their attorney opened. Maybe 50, decent enough, visibly aware he was being paid with a boat. My clients would like to resolve this within the family. They're prepared to offer $12,000 over 18 months and a full mutual release. Adrian looked at me. I said no. Then my mother started, and I let her go all the way, because she does the most damage to herself when nobody interrupts. You have taken everything from us. Hands folded, voice pleasant, that's the part nobody ever believes. Your father is 71 years old, we will be renters at 71 because of you. Because of a note you signed. Over a favor. You bought a boat with it 3 weeks later. She waved that off like a fly. The boat has nothing to do with anything. It sold for $9,400, I said. It's the reason your lawyer is sitting in this room. Her attorney glanced down at his legal pad, and that told me he hadn't known where his retainer came from. Then the excuses started, one at a time, and each one collapsed on contact. That paper was never meant to be enforced. It was a formality to make you feel involved. Adrian slid a page across the table. This is your invoice. Page 2. You offered to cancel a $412,000 demand in exchange for the release of a lien you now say never existed. Which document was the lie, Mrs. Whitlock? Silence. Fine, we were in a hard place. Tyler's business was about to fail, and we did what parents do. You didn't give anything to Tyler, I said. I did, all of it. And then you stood in a driveway and toasted his hustle. He earned that contract. He got that contract because I gave his number to Vanessa Reeves at a lunch in 2019 and asked her not to tell him where it came from. My father's head came up. Slowly. He looked at my mother, then at me, and I watched a 71-year-old man do arithmetic on 6 years of his own life. Is that true? Ask Tyler who referred him, he doesn't know either. Loretta reached for the last card she had, the same one she'd played since I was 15. This is tacky, Corrine, dragging money through a lawyer's office. It's tacky and it's small and it is beneath the way I raised you. 14 years of that word, in a conference room, with a public court file already stamped. You put a due date on love, I said. In bold, at the bottom of page 2, don't talk to me about tacky. That's when Brooke spoke. She'd been at the end of the table for 20 minutes, and nobody had asked why she was there, including me. She reached into her bag and put 6 photocopied pages down in front of our mother. Yellow legal pad, Loretta's handwriting, Corrine, actual costs. $297,000, Brooke said. That's your own total, Mom, your own hand. You told 90 people $412,880. That's different. Why? Her voice cracked and she kept going anyway. Explain how it's different. You added $115,000 so a room would gasp, and there's no pad with my name on it. I looked. I went through every drawer in that house. One child in that kitchen got a ledger, and it wasn't me. You don't understand what she's cost this family. She paid for my wedding hall, and you let me thank Dad for it at my bridal shower. Then Brooke stood, picked up her bag, and said the sentence I'll hear for the rest of my life. You told Aunt Judith that Brooke was the investment and Corrine was the insurance. She told me in June. I've thought about it every day since. Mom, you didn't have 2 daughters, you had a portfolio. She walked out, their attorney asked for a 5-minute recess. Nobody took it. That's when my father spoke for the first time in 20 minutes, and he didn't speak to Adrian, and he didn't speak to his wife. Corrine, your grandmother's paper, the apartment, the 14-5. You signed it in 1984. I remember signing it. He put both hands flat on the table. She sat me down at her little table and made me sign it, and Loretta was furious for a month. All these years I thought that was just your mother being difficult. 1 syllable of a laugh, no humor in it at all. She was protecting you, in 1984, before you existed. She left me the residue of her estate, I said. The will says it's because I was the only one who ever sat with her while she sorted her papers. My mother said quietly, that senile old woman. And my father turned to her and said, Loretta, stop. 40 years, and I had never once heard him do that. Then he asked me what I actually wanted. I'd rehearsed it in the car, so I got it right. The judgment satisfied, that's all. $64,120 plus costs. The house sells at the sheriff's sale in January, my lien gets paid at the top, whatever's left is yours. That's $4,000, Corrine, maybe 11. I know exactly what it is. I read title for a living. It's the number that was always going to be there once somebody finally looked. So you're taking our house? No, you sold the house in February. You just forgot to check who else had signed something. She stood up then and asked the question she'd been building toward since June, in front of her own lawyer. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. Is that what all of this has been for? Here's what I'd worked out somewhere around August, on a plastic chair in a courthouse hallway. You still think I want an apology? You think I spent 4 months and $11,000 in legal fees to buy 3 words from you? I picked up my folder. Mom, I stopped auditioning. That's the whole thing. There is nothing you can say in this room that I need. And then I gave her back her own line, the one she'd read into a microphone in front of 90 people, with one word changed. $412,000. That's what it cost to raise me, and a decent mother would have never sent the bill. Nobody moved. Her mouth opened once and nothing came out, and I understood right then that she had never in her life had to answer a sentence she couldn't reframe. That was her gift. 40 years of turning every accusation into somebody else's bad manners. And she couldn't do it with her own words, because they were her words, and there were 90 witnesses and a 41-minute recording that said so. She sat down, slowly, the way people sit when their legs make the decision for them. You planned this, she said. You sat at my party and you planned this. You planned it. You rented the room, you picked the date, you had it printed on cardstock, and you put a payment option at the bottom. I brought 1 page. Adrienne closed her folder, which is a sound lawyers make on purpose. Mr. and Mrs. Whitlock, my client has told you what she wants, and it's less than she's legally entitled to. The judgment stands either way. The only thing you control now is whether the house sells in January or whether you pay it off before the sale is confirmed. Their attorney said, we'll need to discuss it with our clients. Do that, Adrienne said. I stood up. My father stood too, which startled me. He put his hand out, thought better of it, and just said, Corrine, the apartment, the window your grandmother put in over her table, if the house sells, that goes. I hadn't thought about that window in 11 years. I thought about it every day for the next 3 months. I know, I said. My mother spoke one last time, and it's the closest thing to honesty she has ever given me, so I'll repeat it exactly. I don't understand you. I have never understood you. You had every chance to be easy, and you chose to be right. I stopped in the doorway. No, Mom, I chose to be paid. You're the one who taught me the difference. Then I walked out into a hallway with beige carpet and a water fountain, and Daniel was sitting in a chair by the elevator with his coat on his lap, and he stood up and didn't ask me a single question. He just held the door. In the parking garage, I called Judith, because she'd earned the phone call, and told her it was done. She said, did she cry? No. She won't. A pause. Your grandmother said that about her once. Loretta doesn't cry, she reschedules. Their attorney withdrew from the case 11 days later for non-payment. My parents filed nothing after that. No appeal, no redemption, no motion, nothing, all the way to January. And that's how a foreclosure actually ends, not with shouting, with a docket that stops moving. The sheriff's sale happened on January 22nd. A young couple bought 4412 Ridgeline Road for $241,000, which is what happens when a house sells at auction instead of on a Saturday with fresh flowers on the counter. My judgment was paid from the proceeds on February 6th, $64,120, plus costs, wired to my attorney's trust account and then to mine. My parents received a check for $7,140. I did not celebrate. I paid Adrienne's final invoice, and then I did the only thing with that money that made any sense to me. I bought the garage apartment's window. Let me explain. When the new owners started renovating, they gutted the space over the garage, and they listed a few things on a local salvage page, including a stained glass panel from the 1920s that my grandmother had installed herself in 1986, a small one, amber and green, that used to throw colored light across her little table on summer afternoons. They wanted $200 for it. I drove out there on a Sunday and paid cash, and the wife helped me wrap it in a moving blanket. She asked if I'd lived there. I said my grandmother had, for 15 years, and that she was the best person in that house. It hangs in my office now, in the window above my desk, and in the afternoon it puts amber and green on the wall next to a framed footnote about plumbers. My parents rent a 2-bedroom in a complex off Sawmill Road for $1,540 a month. My father took a part-time job doing deliveries for a hardware store, 20 hours a week, at 71 years old. He told me that himself. Because we talk now, not a lot, once every few weeks. He called me in March, the first time, and he didn't ask for anything, which is how I knew it was real. He asked about Daniel's classroom. He asked whether I still had a leaners folder. And then he said, "I've been sitting here trying to work out when I stopped being on your side, and I can't find the day. I think I was never on it. I think I just wasn't against you," and I told myself that was the same thing. That's as close to an apology as I've ever gotten from either of them, and honestly, it's better than the one I used to want. It was specific. It cost him something. My mother has not spoken to me since October 18th, 16 months. She did, however, write to me, once, last April, a card in her handwriting which she still does beautifully. Inside, one line, "I hope you're satisfied with what you've built." I am actually, so I never wrote back. Here's what I know about her life now, second-hand from Brooke. 41-minute recording never went anywhere. Judith kept it, I kept it. Nobody posted it. And yet the story moved through that church and that neighborhood anyway because 90 people were in the Blackthorn room and roughly 89 of them told somebody. Loretta resigned from the hospitality committee she'd chaired for 19 years. Nobody asked her to. She resigned before anyone could, which tells you she understood exactly what she'd done, and understood it in June, and chose the invoice anyway. Judith turned 70 in December. She and I have dinner every month at a diner in Clintonville, and she orders the same thing every time, and she tells me stories about my grandmother I never knew. That Aliner voted in every election since 1952. That she wanted to be a court stenographer and got married instead. That in 2011, when I paid for the roof, Aliner called Judith and said, "Corrine just bought that woman a roof and she'll never hear thank you, and I've made arrangements." Made arrangements, in 2011, 2 years before she died. Tyler's company is smaller now. 2 trucks, residential work, and Brooke says he's happier, which may be a thing people say. He found out in September where the office park contract had come from, and he sent me a text I still have. 11 words, "I never asked, I should have asked. I'm sorry, Corrine." Brooke and I are figuring it out. Slowly. She's the only person from that house who ever produced evidence against her own interest, and I don't take that lightly. Last summer she brought her son to our place for the 4th of July, and there was no grill speech and no boat in the driveway, and he fell asleep on our couch during the fireworks, and Brooke sat on my back steps and said, "I keep waiting for you to make me pay for the 20 years. I told her there was no ledger. That's not a thing I do. And that's really the whole point, the thing I want you to take out of this if you take anything. I never wanted to be right about my mother. For 36 years, I would have traded every dollar I had for one Sunday where she looked at me the way she looked at Brooke walking into a room. That's what people misunderstand about stories like mine. It was never a strategy. There was no long game. I kept receipts because a woman I loved taught me to keep receipts, and then I sat on them for 14 years hoping I'd never have to open the folder. She's the one who turned love into a transaction. She printed it, itemized it, and read the total into a microphone. All I did was accept the terms she wrote, and then apply them in both directions. That's what people call revenge. I'd call it accounting. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. One last time, tell me your country and what time it is where you are right now, and if this one hit somewhere real, subscribe, because I've got another story about a family that thought paperwork was slow and stupid. I'll leave you with the thing Aliner said to me at her little table when I was maybe 11, sorting her canceled checks into piles because I liked being useful. Paper doesn't get emotional, Corrine. Paper just remembers. She was wrong about one part. It wasn't the paper that remembered. It was her, and she was watching the whole time.